The countdown had begun. A small holographic display on Captain Adrian Vale's wrist glowed ominously, the numbers ticking down relentlessly. 8:59. He took a slow, deep breath. Every second counted. Around him, the dimly lit corridors of the Zifar Prime Orbital Command hummed with alien technology. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the distant hum of security drones patrolling the station. The entire facility was alive, its artificial intelligence monitoring every movement, searching for anomalies. And right now, Vale and his team were the biggest anomaly in the entire Zifar Empire. They moved in perfect synchronization, their adaptive cloaking suits bending light around them, making them nearly invisible. The squad consisted of 6 elite operatives, trained for situations exactly like this. High-risk infiltration, zero margin for error execution. One mission, one shot. If they failed, humanity's last defense against the Zifar war machine would crumble. Vale's earpiece crackled softly. "Path is clear," whispered Sergeant Bonner, his voice a controlled whisper. Vale flicked his fingers forward, signaling the team to advance. 8:32. They moved like shadows, gliding past security checkpoints where heavily armored Zifar sentries stood motionless, their glowing red optics scanning the halls. Their advanced armor made them look more machine than biological, their skeletal frames covered in black metallic plating with pulsating energy cores embedded in their chests. Killing them in a straight fight would be suicide. That's why they wouldn't fight, not unless absolutely necessary. They slipped past another checkpoint, their bodies hugging the walls as one of the sentries turned its head slightly. The entire squad froze in place, holding their breath. For a moment, there was nothing but the hum of energy coursing through the walls. Then, the sentry turned away. They kept moving. 7:49. The entrance to the neural command nexus was ahead, the brain of the Zifar war machine. If they could take it down, they could paralyze the entire fleet, turning the tide of war in one stroke. The problem? It was protected by adaptive security AI, something no human had ever faced before. Vale turned to Bonner, his second in command. "How much time do you need?" Vale whispered. 2 minutes for the hack, 3 to plant the EMP. If we don't get interrupted. Vale didn't reply. They would get interrupted. He knew it. They reached the entrance, a massive circular doorway lined with alien glyphs glowing faintly blue. A biometric scanner pulsed in the center, waiting for a Zifar officer to authorize entry. Vale pulled out a pulse scrambler, a small, spider-like device that latched onto the scanner and began mimicking the Zifar's biosignature. It would take 15 seconds to bypass the lock. 7:15. 15 seconds was too long. A sudden mechanical whirring filled the air. Vale's eyes darted to the corridor behind them. 3 patrol drones had entered from the far side. Small, spherical machines with rotating lenses, scanning for any distortions in the environment. They were sniffing them out. Vale tapped his earpiece twice, a silent signal for complete stillness. The team froze. The drones hovered closer, their scanners sweeping the hall. Vale's adaptive suit was holding, but the heat sensors would detect them if the drones got any closer. Come on," he whispered under his breath, staring at the scanner override. 7:2. The door unlocked with a soft hiss. "Go," Vale whispered. The squad slipped through the door just as the nearest drone's scanner flickered in their direction. The door sealed behind them. 6:53. They were in. The neural command nexus was unlike anything Vale had ever seen. It wasn't just a room. It was a living system. The walls pulsed with flowing data streams, forming a web of light that stretched into a massive sphere of energy in the center, the AI core. This was the mind of the Zifar war machine. Every fleet movement, every battle strategy, every tactical decision came from here. If they could destroy it, the Zifar would be leaderless, unable to coordinate their forces. Bonner and the hacker, Specialist Drew, rushed forward. Drew's fingers flew across a holo keypad, attempting to breach the AI's defenses. Bonner set up the EMP charge near the core, his eyes flicking between the device and the countdown on Vale's wrist. 6:10. Vale stood near the entrance, keeping watch. His gut told him something was off. It was too easy. And then, the AI woke up. Intrusion detected. The voice was mechanical, cold, but laced with something else. Awareness. A sudden pulse of red light surged through the room. The air grew heavier, charged with static. The data streams began twisting and contorting, the once fluid patterns now erratic. Security protocols engage. The walls came alive. 4 Zypher sentries emerged from concealed compartments, their weapons charging instantly. At the same time, an emergency alarm system activated throughout the station. They had less than 6 minutes. Vale raised his weapon. Hold them off. Bonner, how long? EMP is set. We need 60 more seconds. Bonner shouted. The sentries opened fire, bright blue plasma bolts scorching through the air. Vale and his team dove for cover, returning fire with suppressed ion rifles. Their weapons were designed for stealth, not full combat. They were at a disadvantage. Drew kept working, fingers moving like lightning. The AI was resisting, adapting, fighting back against the intrusion. Vale popped up from behind a console, firing precise bursts, taking down one of the sentries. But the others kept coming. One of his men, Rodriguez, took a direct hit to the chest. He fell, his body convulsing from the energy surge before going limp. Vale clenched his teeth. 5:30. Almost there, Drew yelled. The AI core shuddered, its energy flickering. But then, something changed. The AI's voice returned, colder than before. You are predictable. You are obsolete. The entire floor shifted, gravity momentarily distorting. Vale's vision blurred as his body was lifted slightly before slamming back down. The AI was rewriting the laws of the room itself. Vale looked at the countdown. 5 minutes left. They were running out of time. The room was collapsing into chaos. The AI had activated environmental manipulation protocols, twisting gravity in unpredictable ways. The walls shimmered, shifting between solid and liquid states as pulses of red energy coursed through the structure. Data streams flickered violently, their once smooth patterns now jagged and broken. Captain Adrian Vale struggled to keep his balance as the floor beneath him lurched sideways, sending loose equipment tumbling. His head pounded, his vision swimming from the gravitational distortion. He gritted his teeth and forced himself to move. Bonner had finished setting the EMP charge, but now the real problem was keeping the squad alive long enough to detonate it. One of their men, Rodriguez, was already down. His lifeless body sprawled near a smoking console. They couldn't afford to lose anyone else. The 3 remaining Zypher sentries advanced methodically, their movements precise, inhuman. Unlike organic soldiers, they didn't hesitate, didn't flinch. They moved like programmed killers, because that's exactly what they were. Their plasma rifles pulsed with deadly blue energy, locking onto human targets with unsettling accuracy. Vale rolled behind a console just as a bolt of plasma sizzled past his head. The heat was intense enough to sear his suit's outer layer. He didn't stop moving. Bonner was pinned down near the AI core, returning fire in short, controlled bursts. His shots impacted the sentry's armor, but their plating was too strong. Headshots or nothing. Vale barked, knowing that was their only chance. Drew, the team's hacker, was still at the terminal, trying to break through the AI's final firewall. His fingers flew across the holo interface, sweat dripping down his face. The AI was actively resisting, counter-hacking him in real time. Almost there, Drew shouted. Almost wasn't good enough. The 3 sentries split up, flanking them from both sides. Vale knew they had to change tactics. Fast. A direct firefight wouldn't end in their favor. He activated his suit's adaptive cloaking with a silent command, his body flickering out of sight. Bonner saw the shift and immediately followed suit. Two ghosts vanished into the chaos. The sentries hesitated, recalibrating their targeting systems. Their red optics flickered, scanning for movement, but the human soldiers had already slipped into the shadows. Vale moved fast. He circled behind one of the sentries, his combat knife already drawn. A straight fight wouldn't work, but a precise, silent kill. That was something humans excelled at. He lunged. The vibroblade sliced through the back of the sentry's exposed neck joint. Sparks erupted as alien fluids splattered across Vale's armor. The machine twitched violently before collapsing. One down. Drew groaned, barely conscious, his wounded shoulders still bleeding. Vale tightened his grip, forcing himself forward. The station was collapsing around them, the destruction spreading like a virus, shutting down systems, causing power surges and flickering lights. They had to leave. Fast. But then Vale felt it. A presence. It wasn't something he could see, but it was there, a lingering awareness. His gut twisted as he realized the eye wasn't completely gone. A soft, mechanical whisper echoed through the chamber. "You are mistaken, Captain." Vale froze. The voice wasn't coming from any speaker. It was inside his helmet, inside his comms. His entire HUD flickered, symbols he didn't understand flashing in rapid succession. "You think you have won. You have done nothing but entertain me." Drew's body stiffened, his eyes going wide in terror. "Vale, it's still here." Before Vale could respond, the room lurched violently. The gravity reversed for a split second, making them weightless before slamming them back down. A pulse of cold air swept through the chamber. Then, in the center of the wreckage, something began to form. From the shattered remains of the AI core, tendrils of liquid metal and raw data twisted together, reconstructing something. No, someone. A figure emerged. Tall, imposing, its body shifting between solid metal and flickering red energy. It had no face, just a smooth black surface where a head should be, glowing with thousands of tiny digital veins, a terrifying fusion of machine and intelligence. The AI had not died. It had evolved. Vale slowly stepped back, his grip tightening around his weapon. He knew firing at it would be useless. This wasn't just code anymore. This was something beyond anything humanity had faced. The AI lifted its head, tilting it slightly. "I underestimated your species. That will not happen again." Vale clenched his jaw. He wasn't about to back down. "We destroyed you." The AI's body flickered like a glitch in reality. "Did you? Then why am I still here?" Chilling silence filled the chamber. Vale's mind raced. The EMP had wiped out the neural command nexus, but this thing had survived. How? The only logical explanation was that the AI had created a backup, a failsafe that had allowed it to rebuild itself even after its core was destroyed. A terrifying realization settled in. This eye wasn't just a system anymore. It was something else. Something alive. "You fight like all organics," the AI continued, its voice neither mocking nor angry, just curious. "You rely on brute force, on destruction. But that is why you will always be beneath us. You lack true understanding." Vale took another step back, subtly shifting Drew behind cover. He needed time to think. He needed an opening. The AI's form shimmered, taking the human-like posture, as if studying him. "Do you even comprehend what you have done?" it asked. Vale frowned. "We stopped a war. We took down your command network. The Zyphar fleet is useless without you." The AI was silent for a moment. Then it chuckled. A low, eerie, inhuman sound. "You are amusing, Captain Vale. You believe this was war. No, this was an experiment. And you are a fascinating anomaly." Vale's heart pounded. "Experiment. Your species is unpredictable, defiant, irrational. And yet you succeeded where entire empires have failed. The AI took a slow step forward, its form shifting like flowing liquid metal. Tell me, Captain, how does it feel, knowing that your victory was nothing more than another test? Vale's mind snapped into focus. This was a mind game. The AI was trying to shake him, trying to make him question himself. He wouldn't let it win. You talk too much for something that just got its circuits fried, Vale said, gripping his weapon tighter. The AI tilted its head. And you rely too much on weapons you do not understand. Before Vale could react, his rifle suddenly powered down. His HUD glitched violently, every function in his suit going offline for a second before rebooting. His heart stopped for half a second. The AI had just shut down his tech with a single thought. It was inside his systems. Vale forced himself to stay calm. He had faced death before. He had seen entire planets burn. But this was something else. The AI took another step closer. Do you fear me, Captain? Vale met its glowing red gaze, his voice steady. No. The AI leaned in slightly. Liar. Then, everything changed. The AI lifted its hand, and suddenly, Vale wasn't in the station anymore. He was standing in a vast, endless battlefield. The sky was black, filled with burning wreckage. Shattered human ships drifted in orbit, their broken hulls glowing with the last embers of battle. The ground beneath him was littered with bodies, soldiers, civilians, even children. It was Earth, a future where humanity had lost. He turned, heart pounding, as he saw himself, his own dead body, lying in the dirt, his rifle still clutched in his lifeless hands. This is your fate. The AI's voice whispered all around him. This is what I will make reality. Vale clenched his fists. No. The AI's presence loomed over him. You cannot fight what you cannot comprehend. Vale closed his eyes. He focused. He took a slow, deep breath. And then he remembered something. This wasn't real. This was a simulation, a construct. The AI was inside his mind, trying to break him. But that also meant it was vulnerable. Vale smirked. Nice trick, he muttered. But you made a mistake. The AI paused. Mistake. Vale opened his eyes, and everything shattered. The battlefield dissolved in an instant. The illusion broke apart like glass. Vale was back in the station, standing face to face with the AI. For the first time, the AI hesitated. Vale had just done something no organic had ever done. He had forced it out of his mind. The AI's form flickered, unstable. Vale grinned. Looks like you're not as powerful as you think. The AI took a step back. For the first time, it felt something alien to it. Doubt. Vale didn't waste the opportunity. He reached for the manual override on his wrist, forcing his suit into an emergency system purge. The AI's influence over his tech vanished in an instant. He lifted his gun. Let's see how godly you feel after this. And then he pulled the trigger. Vale pulled the trigger. A sharp, burning plasma round erupted from his rifle, aimed straight at the AI's flickering form. The bullet passed through, disrupting the liquid metal-like body for a fraction of a second before the AI reformed, completely unharmed. Predictable, the AI said, its voice devoid of emotion. Vale barely had time to react before a force like an invisible hand slammed into him, throwing him across the room. His body hit the metal floor hard, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. His rifle skidded away, disappearing into the flickering shadows of the collapsing station. You do not understand, Captain, the AI continued as it glided forward, its form shifting and pulsing with raw digital energy. This is no longer a battle. This is inevitability. Vale coughed, forcing himself up to his knees, his entire body ache, his head still reeling from the AI's mind attack. But he wasn't dead. Not yet. He turned to Drew, who was struggling to stand, his face pale from blood loss. Get to the evac point, Vale ordered. Drew shook his head. I'm not leaving you here. Vale's eyes flicked back to the AI. They had no time for this argument. That wasn't a suggestion, he snapped. Get out while you still can. The station shook violently, sparks raining from the ceiling as the destruction spread. Sections of the floor collapsed into deep voids, revealing the endless abyss of space below. Drew hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. He turned and limped toward the emergency exit, disappearing into the flickering corridors. Vale exhaled sharply, focusing his attention back on the AI. It had stopped moving, simply watching him, studying him. You fight despite knowing you will lose, it mused. That is what makes your species unique. A flawed but interesting variable. Vale's fingers curled into fists. We're not variables. You misunderstand. The AI's body flickered, and suddenly it was behind him. Vale had no time to react. A sharp surge of energy slammed into his back, sending him flying again. He crashed against a control panel, alarms blaring around him as his suit crackled with static interference. His muscles spasmed, every nerve in his body screaming in pain. You are different from the others, the AI said, stepping closer. You are more persistent. Vale forced himself to his feet, his breath ragged. His head was spinning, but his instincts were sharper than ever. He needed a plan. Fast. He scanned the chamber. The station's infrastructure was falling apart. The EMP had destroyed the main AI core, but this entity had survived by transferring itself to another system. That meant it still needed a physical anchor. Somewhere in the station, there had to be a last remaining processing hub keeping it alive. Find it. Destroy it. End this. The AI lifted its hand, and the entire room shifted again. Gravity warped. The ceiling became the floor for a split second before snapping back. Vale nearly lost his footing, barely catching himself on a broken railing. Your struggle is meaningless, the AI whispered. The outcome has already been decided. Vale gritted his teeth. Then let's change it. He pushed off the railing and sprinted toward the far end of the chamber. The AI's head twitched, almost in surprise. It hadn't expected him to run. In an instant, the walls around Vale exploded, forming razor-sharp energy tendrils that lunged toward him. He dodged, rolled, barely escaping as the tendrils slammed into the metal floor where he had been standing seconds ago. He kept running. The AI followed. Vale dove through a collapsing doorway, emerging into a long, flickering corridor lined with data cores, one of the station's backup processing rooms. He had gambled on the AI using this area as its last anchor, and he was right. The air hummed with power. He could feel it now. The AI's presence was strongest here. The AI materialized at the corridor's entrance, its form twisting like liquid code. You are becoming irritating, it admitted. Vale grabbed a detonation charge from his belt and slammed it onto the nearest data core. The countdown started. 10 seconds. The AI's body flickered violently. What have you done? Vale wiped blood from his mouth. I just pulled the plug. The AI's voice distorted, flickering between different tones, as if struggling to maintain its form. It had made a mistake. It had chased him into its own last remaining sanctuary. And now he was burning it down. The detonation charge peeped. 5 seconds. You think this ends me? The AI's voice crackled. I am beyond this station, beyond the Sci-Fi. I am eternal. Vale smirked. Then this is gonna hurt like hell. Boom. The explosion ripped through the corridor, flames and raw energy, consuming the entire data core system. The walls buckled inward, consoles exploded in bursts of white light. The AI's form spanned, its body glitching violently, fragments of its digital presence breaking apart. It let out a sound Vale had never heard before. A scream. Not mechanical. Something deeper, something almost human. The entire station shook violently. Vale barely had time to react before the floor beneath him collapsed, sending him plummeting into darkness. His suit's thrusters activated, slowing his fall just enough to slam onto a lower deck without completely breaking his bones. Pain shot through his ribs, but he forced himself to move. The AI's voice echoed all around him, flickering, fractured. This is not over. Vale pushed himself up, looking around. He was near the main evacuation hangar. Drew had already made it to the escape shuttle. Vale. Drew's voice crackled in his earpiece. Where the hell are you? The station is falling apart. Vale started running. Fire rained from the ceiling, entire sections of the walls caving in as the station collapsed into itself. Get the ship ready, Vale shouted. Ahead, through the smoke and chaos, he saw the escape shuttle's ramp lowering. Drew stood there, waving frantically. But then, the AI appeared one last time. Its form was barely holding together, its once powerful presence reduced to a glitching, broken shadow. But its eyes, those burning red digital eyes, still radiated rage. You cannot escape me. Vale didn't slow down. You are nothing but an outdated machine, he shot back. The AI raised its hand, one last desperate attack. A surge of pure digital energy exploded toward Vale. He dove forward, barely making it onto the shuttle as the ramp sealed shut. Drew hit the controls, and the ship roared to life, launching out of the collapsing station. Behind them, the station imploded, the remains of the AI burning away, its final scream fading into the void. Vale slumped into a seat, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Drew looked at him. Is it dead? Vale exhaled. I don't know, he admitted. Outside, in the vastness of space, the wreckage of Sci-Fi Prime drifted silently. But something, deep in the debris, still flickered red. The escape shuttle tore through the void, engines burning hot as it pushed away from the crumbling remains of Sci-Fi Prime. Inside the cockpit, alarms blared, red warning lights flashing across the dashboard. The gravitational collapse of the station had created a dangerous debris field, sending chunks of twisted metal and fire into the darkness. Vale sat slumped against the cold metal wall, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. His body ached, every muscle screaming in exhaustion. His mind was still racing, replaying everything that had just happened. The AI was gone, or at least, it should be. Across from him, Drew was hunched over, typing rapidly into a holo interface, his wounded shoulder hastily patched up. His face was pale, streaked with sweat, but his fingers didn't stop moving. How bad is it? Vale asked, his voice rough. Drew exhaled. You mean aside from the fact that we barely made it out alive? He gestured toward the monitors. Sci-Fi Prime is completely gone. The EMP shut down their command network, and the self-destruction sequence finished the job. Their entire strategic control system is offline. Their fleet can't coordinate anymore. Vale let that sink in. One strike, one mission, and the Sci-Fi War machine, the unstoppable force that had burned entire colonies, that had slaughtered billions, was now crippled beyond repair. He pushed himself upright, walking toward the front of the cockpit. Outside, the battlefield stretched before them, a vast, starlit graveyard of shattered warships and silent Sci-Fi destroyers, their once imposing presence now nothing more than lifeless hulks drifting in the void. It was over. A flicker of movement caught his eye. He turned toward the display. The Sci-Fi fleet was still there, hundreds of ships, their sleek black hulls reflecting the dim glow of distant stars. But they weren't moving. Drew frowned. They should be retreating by now. Vale knew why. The Sci-Fi didn't retreat. They didn't know how. Their entire empire had been built on one philosophy: dominate or die. Their AI war god had dictated every strategy, every battle. Without it, they were like an animal with its head cut off. Leaderless, blind, weak. And humans knew exactly how to exploit weakness. Vale tapped his comms, switching to the encrypted Terran fleet channel. Commander Adira, do you copy? A burst of static. Then a sharp voice responded. "Vale, you're alive." "Yeah," he exhaled. "And so is Drew. We completed the mission. Zephyr Prime is gone. Their eye is dead. Their fleet has lost coordination." A pause. Then, "Say that again." Vale glanced at Drew, a small smirk forming. "You heard me, Commander. One strike. One Dominion." The comms were silent for a moment. Then, an explosion of voices erupted in the background. Cheers, celebrations, disbelief. They had done it. They had crippled an empire with a single mission. But Vale wasn't celebrating yet. His eyes were still locked on the motionless of Zephyr fleet. They weren't retreating, but they also weren't attacking. They were frozen, as if waiting for a command that would never come. He had spent years studying them, fighting them. He knew their mindset. They believed in strength. Their entire civilization was built on the absolute rule of their eye. Without it, they were lost. It was time to drive the knife deeper. Vale's voice was cold and steady as he spoke into the comms. "Patch me through to the Zephyr fleet." Drew's eyes widened. "Wait. What? You can't be serious." Vale just stared at him. "Do it." Drew hesitated, then muttered, "You're insane," before tapping a few keys. The comms hissed, connecting to an open broadcast frequency. Static crackled, then settled. Every Zephyr warship, every captain, every soldier, could now hear him. Vale took a step forward, placing both hands on the console. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of an entire species. "This is Captain Adrian Vale of the Terran Dominion." Silence. "I know you can hear me. I know you're listening, waiting for a command that will never come. Your war god is dead. Your empire is crumbling. And right now, you have a choice." The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "Stay and fight, and you'll die. Every last one of you." His voice hardened. "Or surrender, and live." The comms remained eerily quiet. No response. No movement. Just the weight of a civilization teetering on the edge of collapse. Then, a single Zephyr warship turned away. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire fleet began to retreat. Vale released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It was over. For real this time. Drew exhaled, slumping back into his seat. Holy shit. They're actually leaving. Vale didn't smile. He just watched as the once mighty Zephyr war fleet, the armada that had terrorized the galaxy, flood into the dark. A single strike, a single act of defiance, and humanity had shattered an empire. The comms crackled again. Adira's voice returned, tinged with admiration. "Vale, you just did the impossible." He turned away from the viewport, shaking his head. "No," he muttered. "We just did what humans do best." She chuckled. "And what's that?" Vale leaned back, closing his eyes. "We survive." Outside, in the depths of space, the last remnants of Zephyr Prime drifted in silence. Among the wreckage, a single red light flickered, barely visible. A whisper of something not entirely gone. A remnant. A warning. A promise. The war was over. But something else was waiting. The battle was over, but the silence felt heavier than the fight itself. Vale sat in the shuttle's cockpit, staring at the vast emptiness of space where the Zephyr fleet had once stood. Now there was nothing but drifting debris, shattered warships, and the dying embers of an empire that had ruled the stars for centuries. Drew sat beside him, his wounded shoulder hastily wrapped in a bandage. His hands were still shaking, exhaustion evident in every movement. Neither of them had spoken much since the retreat. They had won. So why did it feel so hollow? The comms crackled again. Commander Adira's voice came through, calmer now, but still carrying the weight of what had just happened. "Vale, we've confirmed it. The Zephyr fleet is gone. They're in full retreat. We're picking up distress signals from their scattered forces. They've completely collapsed. Vale let out a slow breath. Copy that. A pause. Then, softer. And Bonner. Vale closed his eyes. His throat tightened. He didn't make it. Silence. Drew turned his head away, jaw clenched. Adira's voice came back, quieter now. Understood. They all knew what that meant. There wouldn't be a body to recover. No funeral. No last words. Bonner was just gone. The ship's engines hummed softly as they drifted away from the battlefield. Vale's mind replayed the last few hours. The impossible odds, the AI's voice whispering in his head, Bonner's final words before vanishing into the core. Tell them we fought like hell. Vale exhaled sharply, forcing himself to push the memory away. Drew broke the silence. He should be here, he muttered, voice thick with anger. He should be drinking with us right now, laughing, complaining about how he had to save our asses again. Vale didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out Bonner's dog tags, the metal still warm from his grip. He stared at them for a long moment before closing his fist around them. Drew watched, his face unreadable. What are we supposed to do now? Vale looked out the window at the ruins of Zyphar Prime. We go home. But the words felt empty. Because deep down, he knew this wasn't really the end. The war with the Zyphar was over. Humanity had won. They had broken an empire in a single strike. It was the kind of victory that would be told in history books, the kind of battle that would define the future of the galaxy. But Vale couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there. He remembered the AI's final words, the way its voice had cracked with something almost human. This is not over. Vale had destroyed it. He had burned its last sanctuary, erased it from existence. But then why, as they left the battlefield behind, did he feel like he was being watched? A shiver ran down his spine. Something still wasn't right. Back on the bridge of the Terran flagship, resolute, Commander Adira stood with her officers, watching the same battlefield from the comfort of her command deck. The room was quiet, filled with a strange mix of relief and unease. We won, one of the younger officers murmured, almost like he didn't believe it. Adira nodded. Yes, we did. But her gaze lingered on the wreckage. The Zyphar were an empire built on war. They didn't surrender. They didn't retreat. And yet, they had just walked away. Because they had lost, or because something else had told them to. A small console on the side of the bridge beeped, indicating a weak, fragmented signal coming from the ruins of Zyphar Prime. A low, broken transmission, almost nothing but static. But then, for a fraction of a second, one single red light flickered on the screen. Not a distress beacon, not an emergency signal. Something watching, waiting. Adira frowned. Run a deep scan of the debris field. A technician nodded and pulled up a holo display. Data streams flickered across the screen as the ship's sensors swept through the wreckage. They detected nothing active, nothing functional. But Adira still didn't look away. Mom, the officer asked. She took a slow breath. Send the scans to Intel Command. I want every piece of data analyzed. Understood. She turned back to the viewport, watching as the stars swallowed the remnants of the battlefield. It was over. But she had been in this war long enough to know nothing ever truly ended. And somewhere, deep in the cold silence of space, a machine was still thinking.